Get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Terry. I am the president of Texas MGMA, and we are so happy to have all of you guys here, and of course our guest speakers. Um, just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have not joined MGMA, please join and get involved, especially in your local chapters. I'm here in Houston, so we have our Gulf Coast Texas MGMA chapter. And I mean, it's the things that we've been able to do in Houston. We have done case competitions for students, a lot of outreach, and it's, as someone who is now in the workforce, being able to give back to students, because we've all been there. I know I really enjoy that aspect. So I just share that with you to encourage y'all to get involved in your local chapters and what they might have or what they might be doing. Also, we started this, I guess it's been a couple weeks or a month. I don't know. The days kind of just all mushed together now. But we have our Lunch and Learns that we have every Wednesday, and it's about half an hour. We've talked about how organizations have responded to COVID, what you've done with staffing. We've talked about billing issues. So we post those out on our website, and Betty also is very good about sending out a flyer for that. So if you are available, please join us. It's also just good to eat and talk to people who are kind of going through the same things you're going through. And I'm always used to eating and talking now since I'm doing things virtually. So that's also fun if you like to break away and talk to people who can relate to you. But those are our housekeeping things. Want to get to our speakers. So this afternoon, we have two presentations for you on the topic of cybersecurity. So we're going to start with a live presentation from Aaron, and that will be followed by a film video that we have from attorney Corrine Smith. So Aaron, it's Murray?
Murray, yeah, pleasure.
Is the Chief Information Officer at the University of Texas, hook 'em horns, and Austin.
Absolutely.
At Dell Medical School and UT Health Austin. Aaron attended the University of Texas at Arlington, where he earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Managing Information Systems. He was the captain of the UTA Soccer Club and was awarded International Competitor of the Year on the UTA debate team. He later attended the University of Dallas, where he graduated with honors and earned his MBA in Healthcare Services Management. So thank you so much for being here. Our second speaker is Corrine Smith. She is a member of Winstead's Healthcare Industry Group and has nearly 2 decades of providing sophisticated legal services to healthcare clients. She has developed a technical acronym encompassing all aspects of the healthcare industry. Corrine graduated from St. Mary's School of Law in San Antonio and earned her Master's of Science in Healthcare Administration and a Bachelor's of Science in Business Administration. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our accomplished speakers. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate MGMA inviting me to come speak and talk a little bit about what we have going on here at Dell Med, and also I kind of talk to you also about the federal landscape. One of the other hats that I wear is I'm also a congressionally appointed member to the HITAC, and the HITAC is a federal advisory committee for the HHS that was established under the 21st Century Cures Act, which is driving all of the interoperability and cybersecurity and other components that I'm sure a lot of you are wrestling with and wondering, what are the penalties for that? What are CMS reimbursement penalties for that? As you saw, CMS put out a final release just last week around potential reimbursement challenges if folks don't share data. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit at high level, like what's really going on at the federal level, and then come down to some tactical issues around cybersecurity that you're probably seeing, wondering like how are people accomplishing this and going through it on the provider side, and especially with COVID-19. And so I figured a story is better told in pictures and those kinds of things. So hopefully my presentation will give you some coloring on it. So Terry or any of the MGMA team, whoever's broadcasting the slides, would you please put them up for me? Fantastic. All right, let's go into it then. So next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about Dell Med and UT Austin. What do we have going on here? So Dell Medical School was established about 5, 6 years ago now. In which case it was needed to be a preeminent location here in Austin, serving the flagship and making sure that we graduate some of the top talent, in the world, as UT Austin typically does across its business school, engineering school. And so the idea of a medical school was born. Well, it's great to have a medical school and all, but you also have a clinical enterprise, right? You'd have hospitals, you'd have clinics, you'd have places to put these students that have graduated in a residency program and so forth and so on. And so the academic health system was born, essentially. So again, the school opened up. There's over 700 faculty and affiliate clinicians and physicians. It's a major research institute and key partnerships with folks like Merck and others already in a short time. Again, it's UT Austin, so you can imagine. The clinical practices launched in 2017 for a care team approach. What I like about this is that it's an integrated practice unit model, which is one of the hallmark tenets of value-based care. And so we hold commercial contracts around value-based care payment and bundled payments, as well as your typical fee-for-service type of contracts. But we really tried to even build the ambulatory building in a way that was made for a multi-care team approach. That's a big differentiator when you come in to see a clinician or a practice in person, is that you're probably going to get a multidisciplinary approach. And that'll give you an example. If I were to say shatter my hand and I need to see an orthopedic surgeon for my hand, I may have what's called catastrophic thinking, meaning, oh man, I like to play racquetball, so I can never play racquetball again. Well, that may just be a symptom of depression or onset depression. You see a psychiatrist or a mental health therapist. So you'll see them in one setting versus the whole episodic, you go bounce to bounce between clinics, and then you're ended up with multiple bills and multiple providers in network, out of network, and here it's one fell swoop. So what we did was we opened up with this model in mind. Now, as I said, some practices lend itself more for the value-based care model than others, and the payers are more apt to paying for them because it's a little easier to track, like ortho or those sorts of things. But for the most part, it was a big component of the way we opened up our practices. The hospitals opened up. They were actually sort of reborn in 2017. It used to be the old Brackenridge Hospital here. Now that hospital is literally outside my window right now. It should be coming down any day, I would think, as we build more buildings in the area. And so what you're looking at over the entire continuum of care is a UT physician staffed adult and pediatric presence in Austin that wasn't here before. And so our close hospital operator partner in the area is Ascension Seton, and they've been phenomenal partners as we've brought in the academic research and the medical school components into this health system here that didn't exist, like I said, about a half decade ago. So it's been a phenomenal boon for the Central Texas area, and the receptivity from the patient population has been amazing, both adult and pediatrics. Next slide. All right, so let's talk a little macro for a second and then go back down to the micro, like I said. So what's going on right now in the 21st century, right? We all know this. Healthcare spending is through the roof, right? 3.3 trillion, expected to reach 5.7 trillion by 26. Life expectancy stinks. Highest number of diseases, influenza and infectious diseases. Obviously, COVID-19 is a recent infectious disease, but there's so many others that we've been grappling with and dealing with, whether it's Zika, whether it's Ebola, whether it's the vaping crisis over the fall, whatnot. This is a major issue, as well as rogue states and organizations, and so forth and so on. Next slide. So what are the healthcare industry challenges, right? What keeps me up at night as a CIO of a large academic healthcare system? Data analytics, total consumer health, population health services. I mentioned you value-based care already. Really the digitization of healthcare, which was hyper accelerated during COVID-19. And we'll talk about that a little later. Of course, pharmacy costs and controlling those and making sure they don't run away from you. As all of you sure know about, the price of insulin and a lot of hospital-based, even bags of saline are through the roof. I mean, it's just these compounding issues that add further costs to the bottom line. Of course, operational effectiveness, opioid management, and what we also want to talk about today, which is cybersecurity. Next slide. So how did we get here, right? From a health IT perspective, there wasn't such a thing as IT departments back in the day. There may have been data processing departments, for those of you who remember, but there wasn't a CIO role, right? There wasn't this, it was really like everything sit to microfiche and then put on these slides and put away in some closet somewhere. That's about it. There was no computers. Well, in about 2009, give or take, maybe a little bit earlier than that, depending on the health system, digitization started occurring. where all the medical records started being digitized, as you know of. And it was really under the ARRA, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, where the dollars for that really were given to hospital systems to be able to invest in digitizing your medical records, right? At first, it was really a concept to really enforce billing and compliance and make sure there was accuracy there and medical necessity and whatnot. But then it became about quality and making sure that we're capturing the right outcomes, the right measures, and thus MACRA was born, right? And thus further introductions of other types of quality affects, including the 21st Century Cures Act, which really is driving a lot of the activity right now on the federal level, right? Around information blocking, standards development, cybersecurity, privacy, and whatnot. But the whole idea of it is to put the power of the patient's data back in the hands of the patient and free up some of these third parties and some of these downstream markets that have locked the data up and saying, nope, you can't have it, it's mine, even though it's not theirs, right? It's the patient's really. It's become this tug of war with the bigger guy battling that with a little guy, and it's tough for the smaller health systems, smaller providers, and smaller startups to be able to break in because it's not an even playing field. So 21st Century Cures Act was about simplifying information flow, making sure that people could trust that there was a level of assurance that your data is secure, AKA cybersecurity, and making sure that we kept privacy in the front of mind so that if Aaron's information was leaked or breached, as we keep seeing like Target and Citibank and all these big players getting breached, if it was a hospital doing that, you would know immediately. And that if I'm the patient, I would be able to react and not suddenly get 15 credit cards opened up in my name by somebody overseas because they have my information. Next slide. All right, so what is really under 21st Century Cures? Talk a little bit more about that, Aaron. Okay, as I mentioned to you, information blocking is a penalty. As I mentioned, look at CMS's latest bulletin about this. It is actually one of the modifiers they're proposing for this upcoming FY21 payment schedule, and that if you block information or you can't demonstrate that you're sharing information, it's going to be a big problem, and you're going to be hitting your pocketbook essentially. Number two, the trusted exchange framework. Think of this as a large superhighway that connects the United States, right? If you were to drive on I-20 and keep going, east, eventually you hit Atlanta, Georgia, and eventually you hit the ocean, right? So think of it as them building the I-20, Interstate 20 of information, right? That all the providers, all of the actors within the healthcare continuum, payers, whatnot, eventually will be able to tap into with a common set of rules, all secure, to make sure that information which now has to flow has an interstate to travel down. EHR transparency and standard certification. One of the big bugaboos that happened from the ARRA was that naturally you had an evolution of companies, the Epics, the Cerners, the Meditechs of the world, others who did a great job of standing up these silos of data with their own proprietary standards to make sure it worked, right? Not right, not wrong, it worked, but it didn't give a uniformity so that when you suddenly were producing a medical record from one system and sending it to another, you're having big issues, right? Whether it's doing pre-authorization, whether it's looking at for medical necessity, whether you're trying to find someone's H&Ps, it became a mess, I'm sure, as all of you know, and your billing and collecting teams are spending hours and hours and hours trying to figure out what happened. And then you have duplicate records, right? It's like, well, I can't really find Aaron, so I'm gonna create another Aaron. And then suddenly you find the records, like I need to merge and do an overlay. It's a big mess. This type of transparency certification standards will allow for all future versions of electronic health records to be playing from the same set of rules, right? You see a common theme here: standardization, harmony, transparency. That's kind of the running theme here going forward in healthcare. All right, patient matching. I think we all know maybe finding Aaron Meary is a little easier in a haystack than it would be to say a Jane Smith or a John Doe. But for all of you in the provider side, as you know, if you look at any of your electronic systems, you're going to have at least two, if not many, many, many more of the exact same name patient because you simply couldn't find them. Without a single strategy to say, this is how I match up Aaron from one place to another, you suddenly have this variety of issues, which caused issues, can actually lead to clinical and quality issues with potential improper surgery and improper issues, a lot of denials on the billing side because you didn't really verify Aaron as Aaron and verify what he's authorized to have, all these kinds of things, right? So the GAO, the Government Accounting Organization, conducted a study and said, you know what, this is a big issue and we really need to get to the bottom of it. What the Congress is going to do with that remains to be seen. The House of Representatives have tried to repeal this ban on a unique patient identifier. The Senate is kind of pondering that right now, probably won't make it through right now, but at some point you're going to see some strategy emerge for how to find Aaron or find that needle in the haystack. appropriately and save a lot of time and bring a lot of synergy to the market. HIPAA training. All right, people love to say HIPAA about everything, right? In fact, I was reading something the other day where there was like veterinarian offices saying, I can't tell you the status of your dog because of HIPAA. Well, that's not the case. So people need to be retrained on what is HIPAA, right? People use HIPAA a lot as a crutch to say, I don't want to do X, Y, and Z action or share whatever data because of HIPAA. That's not the case at all. So within 21st Century Cures, there's a lot of monies provided for training, for provider practices or any kind of care provider to be able to tap into federal funds to retrain the workforce on what does HIPAA actually mean and what does it allow you to do and not do. This has been very important during COVID-19 because HHS has relaxed certain rules so that we could quickly get in front of who's really sick with COVID-19 and who's not. And then as I mentioned a little earlier about the HITAC, right? The Health Information Technology Advisory Committee was established under 21st Century Cures as the preeminent expert panel of about 20 or so people across the country, across industry, right? So payer, vendor, provider, physician, patients represented. And then of course there's congressional, like the president can appoint some people, there's ex officios and the CDC and others there as well. And we go through these topics to give the secretary, to give the administration and to Congress what we feel should be happening, right? And so we've been meeting now for several times. There was a meeting yesterday. I would encourage you all to go to the Office of National Coordinator, the ONC website, and search HITAC and see the meeting minutes of what's being talked about. There's a whole lot of items here that are germane and that you may find interesting. Next slide. So what's next? What can you be expecting at a federal level? Number one, final rule enforcement on information blocking. This is already now sort of being finalized as to what's going to be. Penalties are sort of being pondered on it. A lot of it because of COVID-19 delayed things, but it's coming, right? So what is that going to look like? And what happens if you are a provider that maybe builds software also, like a UT Austin? You're now a provider and also a developer, right? So there's certain standards for both. If you refuse to share data, that you will be penalized for. Stark law reform, right? A whole lot in the news about, oh, this physician is being, is committing inducement because they're maybe giving cybersecurity assistance to somebody else. Well, that's not inducement. You're not worrying about doing referral pattern modification. So they're trying to fix all that by saying, boy, Stark was put in and Stark 2 was put in a while ago. We need to really revamp this for how 21st century works and make sure we keep people safe and hold high quality, but allow people to be able to use technology in the way it was supposed to be done and help each other out. GDPR, privacy. You're going to see a privacy bill at the federal level. This was really in traction before COVID broke out. There's a pause now, but you can be rest assured a bill will come out soon, maybe right after the election, that nationally deals with privacy. And when I say that, what does it mean for the practices? What does it mean for people? What it means is that we're all going to be held to a same standard as to if Aaron's information is breached, make sure he knows within a certain amount of time. Make sure the insurance carriers know within a certain time so that someone can't go take his information and try to say, okay, Aaron is going to go do surgery on these 30 things, pay for him. That kind of thing, right? Give people a level playing field because right now it varies state to state. Like California has a CCPA, Texas has a higher bar in terms of how to do breach notification in the national bar. We need to level that playing field. Genomic companies. Right now, when you look at like 23andMe and other organizations, they don't fall under HIPAA, right? They actually fall under some pseudo jurisdiction of the FTC, but the FTC doesn't have any ability really under statute to go regulate that. So you can see that sooner or later, this one and the next bullet, FTC and FDA doubling down on enforcement go together, that you're going to start seeing people be able to regulate these types of companies because they are dealing with electronic protected health information, right? They are dealing with companies that deal with EPHI, except they didn't exist when HIPAA was created, right? You didn't have these things. You didn't have Apple iWatches with HealthKit running on it, right? How does that work? If Apple decides to be a bad character, who regulates them, right? These are the kinds of things that are being worked through right now at a federal level. Like I said, liberation of patient data silos, we really talked about it. EMEA and APAC US-based patients and globalization, being patients from Europe, patients from Asia. We see that at academic health system, but that data has to be secure and a conformity within law. And then the two phrases I like to always tell my teams here. One is data is a new commodity, but insight is a devil, meaning that everybody wants to trade data, but what does it actually mean? It's great that I know that Aaron got a cappuccino yesterday at 3 o'clock, but did that lead to his blood pressure increasing afterwards or not, right? Like, what does it actually mean? So people are doing these big data harvests, but they don't know what in the world they're talking about. Like, what does this actually mean and what's the affect of that? That's going to be a whole nother subline here under all of us to say, okay, now what? Now we've liberated the data, now what, right? So a whole lot of new legislation will come up around that. And then I always say this about everything, which is don't be creepy with your technology, meaning don't do things with technology just because you think you can do it or you should do it without really thinking through privacy and what's right for the patients and right for your providers. I've seen too many development companies and a lot of providers err on the side of, oh, put cameras everywhere, monitor everything. Let's listen to people at their house via a Nest or Alexa device. Why? Why would you do that, right? That does nothing to help the trust and affirmation of the healthcare system, and it further erodes trust. So you're going to see a lot of doubling down on enforcement of people being a little creepy with technology and making sure you dial it back to a level that is transparent and in partnership with the population. All right, next slide. All right, so I call this a giant healthcare COVID-19 pivot, right? I like Friends, so I found this slide. I thought it was cool. But yeah, basically what happened with COVID-19 is that suddenly, IT healthcare was looking at how do we make sure we're secure and we keep data transparent and we, do granular consent and all these things, which are important. But then you have a national pandemic outbreak, a once in a century outbreak, hopefully once in a century outbreak, that we had to relax rules immediately and go into firefighting mode, because for a time there, we thought truly this is a catastrophic situation that was going to become close to unmanageable. Next slide. So I'm going to sort of put it out there for you guys before we go into some details here. In the last 15 years, 52% of Fortune 500 companies have gone extinct, right? I'm sure you recognize these logos. In fact, I keep my Blockbuster card on my shelf on my home office as a reminder to myself that companies can vanish at any given time, even though you thought they were cool back in the day and Be Kind and Rewind. They vanished because they didn't digitize. Next slide. So the question I have for all of you, I'm going to ask out loud and you can't answer, is if you could go back to 2010 and invest $1,000 in a single publicly traded stock, what company would you invest in? You normally would think, oh, it's got to be like Tesla, although Tesla is crashing right now, their stock price, or it would be Amazon, right? Or even Google, or all these, all would be great bets. But guess what the #1 stock is? Next slide. Domino's Pizza. Why? Because they invested in digitization of their product, and surprisingly, the consumer audience absolutely resonated and responded with, yeah, I want to see you make my pizza over webcam. I want to see and know the delivery time and where the delivery driver is, right? I want to know I can order a pizza through Twitter with a certain hashtag and it'll immediately show up 15, 20 minutes later, with a cheese pizza or whatever. You can tell it's lunchtime here, I'm a little hungry. But regardless, that's what digitization is, right? Healthcare has to be able to go through that same process, and COVID-19 accelerated that. So the organizations that were able to digitize quickly or were already on that journey have weathered the COVID-19 storm a whole lot better than those who haven't and were really stuck in the traditional fee-for-service model and being more encounter-based in person than digital. Next slide. So this is a sort of a general, I think we all know this, that continued cost pressures drive technology leaders to seek tech leverage, right? Being, again, going back to costs are going up. The only limiting factor here, besides keeping medicines and others down or overhead down, is tech. Can tech lower the cost of delivery of services? And that's what we've seen over the past couple of months. The answer is yes. Next slide. So how does COVID-19 transformation affect privacy and security, right? And I love Dilbert, and I thought this was a great little comment to put in there, that at the end of the day, a lot of the issues we've had have not really been about tech, but really been about people and process. I don't mean to say that people are bad, but process built around people is archaic. And so when you digitize something, when you look at what Domino's did, it wasn't that just hung a bunch of webcams on the pizza delivery line and said, here, Aaron, now like me more, right? And your price will go up and all is good. It's also the process is streamlined, right? They figured out how to engage the consumers in a way that was didactic and thus generate revenue for the bottom line and for their shareholders. Next slide. So what are we doing here that has really been transformational in light of COVID-19? Not that we weren't doing this before, but it's important to note why we pivoted to do these things at a hyper-accelerated rate to make sure we took care of Austin. So there's a number of interviews I've given in detail, but there's a lot of things that are going on around data and data availability, right? So we open up the data pipes, just going back to what 21st Century Cure is about, to make sure that the data pipes are open and that we're able to put the dashboards together, what's going on. Testing, who's sick, where are they sick, whatnot. And as you see here on the left-hand side, that's an actual slide from 2 days ago of what's going on at UT Health Austin testing, what we're seeing in terms of confirmed cases of people coming into the medical center, and then also some statistics and overall for Travis County of what's going on there. On the telehealth side, obviously I just showed you, but there's dashboards, a lot of visits that are going on. An interesting stat for you to all know is that because we are urban based, right? And for those of you who've been to UT Austin, you know that Austin traffic is atrocious. I love the city, hands down, but traffic here is terrible and parking's even worse. So when we do our Net Promoter Score type surveys after discharge, and before COVID, we'd always get NPSs in the 80s, which is great, right? If you look at any NPS benchmark in healthcare, that's like Harley Davidson fanatical kind of love, which is great. But when we look at telehealth, our NPS scores went into the 90s. Why? Because people don't have to worry about parking, people don't have to worry about all the nonsense of Austin traffic, and you get to see your provider immediately, and we built into the workflow to be able to get that appointment and be able to get into it. Next slide. What else did we do? Remote patient engagement, which is critical in this new era and is going to be here to stay. We have chatbot symptom checkers to say, if I'm sick, what do I do? This alleviated the call burden into our call centers to say, okay, if you're age, you're under 45, you have any symptoms and you're low risk, you're good to go, stay home, self-quarantine. But if you're high risk, guess what? It automatically refers you into our nurse triage line and we can get you in for testing. And then if you need to, get into the ED quickly in case you really are sick with COVID and you're having a lot of issues due to comorbidities. In addition to that, we did a lot of remote patient home monitoring. We're sending a lot of patients home with temperature, Bluetooth temperature probes, where they're able to check in on a periodic basis and tell us what their temperature is. This has been able to save folks when they don't have the cognizance or understanding that, boy, my temperature is really getting up there, and being able to say we can intervene proactively and get in front of it, which lowers your risk of severe fallout and also lowers the cost of delivery of care. Next slide. All right, other things, innovation. I'm a big believer in innovating. Even in a pandemic, you've got to innovate, right? So one thing we ran into was a shortage of PPE, and so we 3D printed them. Everybody said, oh, you can't do it, it's effective, whatever. Yes, we can, and yes, we have. So we were able to get in front of the PPE shortage with 3D printing. We did this in partnership with the UT School of Engineering, again, hook 'em horns, and also a partnership with Microsoft and a commercial 3D printing commercial company here in Austin. And so we were able to 3D print N95 masks, N95-like masks. They have to be FDA certified, which is going through right now. They call it N95, but N95-like masks for our providers so that if they run out of their normal N95, they're not using bandanas and handkerchiefs like a lot of people were considering over the country. Contact tracing. This has been a big one. I'm going to double down on this. We are doing contact tracing for the city of Austin in partnership with Austin Public Health. Why? Because UT has some of the best epidemiologists in this area, if not the state. And so we've been advising the governor's strike force and others on what to do and how to do it. And it's really borne a lot of fruit. Next slide. What does that actually look like though? All right, as you all know, UT came back into campus last week now, right? I believe it is last week. The students showed back up. And so in order to reopen a university and take care of the patients coming into hospitals, you have to be able to get in front of people quickly and say, Aaron, you've been exposed. Who have you been around in the past 24, 48 hours? And isolate. That is the best tool we have right now until vaccines are ready, is isolation. So on the left-hand side here, you see what it looks like for our epidemiology team, where they can start building out trees of people and who they've talked to. Obviously, this is all test data. It's not real data, but this is what it looks like to them. So they can quickly see correlations of events, and then we can quickly see where are they coming from. Because perhaps the students that have come to Austin from, say, Dallas, are more exposed. Okay, let's contact the Dallas health authorities, get with them so they can isolate that body of people. That's how this works. That's contact tracing, which takes a tremendous amount of data analytics, epidemiology, and patience to do this. And from a technology sense, requires agility. It requires a quick moving team. Next slide. So this is my final slide here before I wrap up, which is at the end of the day, with cybersecurity and privacy, and then with COVID-19, I'm a big believer that the only limit to our realization of tomorrow will be our doubts of today. I would encourage all of you as part of MGMA to take back a couple of tenets of don't let cybersecurity and privacy stand in the way of innovation and driving forward. Don't let a pandemic freeze you and say you can't digitize and become the Domino's pizza of tomorrow. Don't let these worries of what if, what could, what about reimbursement, don't. Because if you do that, you're going to be stuck and you're going to be behind the scenes and you're going to be one of those practices that are closing and failing because they can't make their margins to keep payroll going. You have to be didactic. You have to be dynamic. And for those of you that have IT professionals working for you or working with you, they must be at the table with you to understand the challenges and offering solutions. Otherwise, I would encourage you to get a new CIO. That's my presentation.
Oh, Aaron, thank you so much. That was outstanding. Do you have time for just a quick question from the chat box?
Please ask me. Yes, please.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you. Here's a question. Do you think data analytics and visualization skills become more prominent for practices?
I do. And in fact, I think that it is important that for some practices that do not have the bandwidth or have the staff to be able to do that, to partner with other organizations or partner with third parties to develop those insights. I'll tell you that some of the easiest insights to gather upfront are financial insights. How do I lower my days of AR? How do I make sure I lower my number of claims that are stuck in adjudication? How do I lower my length of stay, right? These are quick, hard ROI. That's money on the table. And for every CFO listening, cash is king, right? So how do I increase my cash reserves and get my days cash on hand to go up? So I would start there. And then, of course, now with COVID-19, some of the parallel tracks around clinical effectiveness, but start with financial and then build up the clinical component of it, because then now you're paying for with house money the people you need to do the clinical side of things. And that's when you can unlock the research dollars and really bring in money into your practices.
Oh, great. And then about halfway through your presentation, we got a question. Isn't this why we should move to open source interoperability SaaS systems to remove the proprietary, expensive siloed systems?
I think open source, I think open source is great. I think cloud, I'm a big believer in cloud systems. Here at UT Austin, we have partnered with every cloud provider. I have systems built in Amazon, built in Google, and built in Microsoft Azure, but I also have systems on premise, and I'll tell you why. When it comes to PACS and radiology, I love Amazon, but I'm going to knock on them for a second here. They're very proud of their product and will charge you a whole lot of money to bring big data out of the cloud. So if you can run big data or big data sets, a lot of those being radiology images and others locally, you're saving yourself money while still getting to the end of the road, and you're getting to be successful. So I would look at what are you putting up high and make sure it makes sense to be there, but not spending an arm and a leg just to get the same result you could have been on site for a fraction of the cost. At the end of the day, it's all about ROI, and any CIO who tells you otherwise is a bad CIO. It must make financial sense.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. You're getting lots of love in the chat box. Thank you
all. Thank you so much for your time. As a public university, I'm happy to help answer any questions. If you just look me up, shoot me a note. I think my information was on the slide deck there. And above all else, hook 'em.
Absolutely. Thank you again. Thank you.
I have a good one.
You too. Okay, we're gonna go and let's see. We're gonna go do a screen share. We're gonna move on to Corrine Smith, and she has pre-recorded her presentation, and I'm gonna load that up for you, and y'all just